Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for wherever you are. This is the University of Miami live webinar. And today I'm very pleased to have with us one of our own students, which is currently studying on the Masters of Public Administration program, to talk to us a bit about civil service as a profession. In the light that everything that's happening in the US, the controversy around policing and police work, we wanted here at the University of Miami to shed a positive light on this profession that is called police work. And we wanted to look at it from the point of view of someone who's been spending almost 3 decades into this career, who has progressed, who has contributed both to his department and his community, and was decided also to take up the challenge of studying an online degree here with the University of Miami. And we wanted to hear firsthand of his experience and his thoughts on the topic of civil service as a profession. So before we start and before I introduce our key speaker today, just a bit of house rules. This is a 30-minute webinar, so we're going to have a conversation for about 30 minutes. It is an open Q&A webinar, so I invite anyone who has any questions, either for myself or for our key speaker today, to write them down in the Q&A box. And we have a designated space towards the end of the program to address some of the questions live and to make sure that you leave today with them answered. So bearing with us in mind, it is only 30 minutes and we have just limited time to answer as many questions as we have. But if you still have questions, please write them down and we'll make sure to answer as many of them as possible. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to welcome Captain John Barkley. Welcome, John. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. I know it's you have a busy schedule and we really appreciate you doing this. So John right now is studying, as I mentioned, on the Masters in Public Health program. I am very sorry, Masters in Public Administration. And he is here today to talk a bit about his experience with the University of Miami program, and of course to shed a bit of light on what it means to have a career in public service. John, can you please tell us a bit about yourself, a bit about your background, and also maybe how did you come into this career? How did you become a police officer?
I actually, when I grew up in the city of Miami, in Miami over there, so that's how I'm familiar with the University of Miami. And I had a lot of friends who were police officers, and I did a couple of ride-alongs with them where I would ever ride with other officers. And I realized at the time that it just seemed to be the type of career I wanted to get involved in. Naples 28 years ago with my intentions of moving back to Miami, transferring back to Miami, but I fell in love with Naples when I came over here, and a lot of people who visit over here will understand why. Still close enough to Miami to go to University of Miami football games and enjoy everything over there. But I definitely love the area of Naples. And for anybody who is listening who's not familiar with Naples, it is directly across the state. It's on the southwest from Fort Lauderdale in Miami. So that's where we're at. Only about 2 hours away.
Okay. Welcome. And of course, what we did is that we wanted to kind of get an insight of some of your experience as a police officer and what led you to taking up this degree. And what we've done is we've prepared a couple of questions for John. We've sent them to him ahead of time, and we're going to right now have a conversation around those questions. So the first questions that we've asked is, of course, from your experience, John, what is the landscape of law enforcement right now in America, especially with all of the controversy that has been going on in the last few years? And of course, what are some of the changes that you see that need to be implemented to actually improve the situation right now?
I think it's important for law enforcement agencies. That's kind of the the controversies you're speaking of, there's been some shootings of unarmed subjects by police officers. There's been some accusations of excessive uses of force in a lot of situations. It's important, I think, one of the things that agencies have to do is we have to gain trust in the communities that we patrol. Every community is different, and every law enforcement agency is a little different. We have to gain the trust of the communities. I think if we have an event, something like that, and your community supports you and your community understands that you're doing the right thing and you're transparent in how you operate, I think that's going to help build the trust with the communities. A couple of different things, and like I said, every agency is different, every community is different, but some things that we have done and other agencies, we definitely, in the Naples Police Department, we didn't invent any of these projects, but we've incorporated them with our situation, is community policing initiatives, getting officers out in the community to do different things. And the purpose of this is for if someone in the community has an interaction with an officer, that if the person is calling 911 or it's a bad situation, that's not the only time they've ever had interaction with an officer, that they've had positive experiences with them as well, and they can talk to each other as regular human beings. Interactive citizen academies, we do police citizens academies, which is a fantastic way. I know a lot of agencies offer this. That's a great way for people in the community to come and get a hands-on experience and understand everything from the training the officers go through, the equipment the officers use, and more importantly in there, especially in what we're dealing with now, is they understand, they put them in scenario-based training and scenarios and show you just how difficult that job is, that officers are being required to make split-second decisions that, you know, in the blink of an eye, they have to make a decision, and that's going to be, they're going to be judged by that and talked about possibly years after making a split-second decision. It'll show people, you know, the information. Why do two officers have to pull over a car? Why do they shine a flashlight in my face? Why do they put the bright lights on? Why do they do certain things? So that's one of the reasons that people feel, you know, can learn from the Interactive Citizens Academies. We also have involvement in local groups. Here at Naples, what we do, we have an officer assigned in community policing, where the officers will go and attend neighborhood groups when they have meetings, so they get to meet them on that point of view. And it's also important as agencies that members of the community are interactive with your department, meaning that they understand your process. If somebody files a complaint against an officer for anything, rudeness, excessive use of force, they need to know that you have a process in order to do the complaints, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people think that, well, nobody's going to care. If I file a complaint, they're just going to cover it up and sweep it under the rugs, and nothing's going to happen to the officer. And we have to show them that that's very, very far from the truth, as most agencies, a large majority of agencies, are accredited either nationally or through a state accreditation agency. So you have to maintain a certain level of professionalism and the way.
So you have already hands-on experience with, you know, implementing some of these solutions. In your own experience, have you seen an improvement in how communities actually see law enforcement, and has the trust actually, or the trust factor, has it improved?
I can only speak for my agency and from some of the agencies around here that I've seen, the agencies I interact with on a daily basis. I know it becomes more and more difficult with larger agencies, and I could do another half-hour web presentation on why this is. You know, we went through the economic downturn, you know, 7 to 10 years ago, and a lot of agencies all over the country lost positions, and you lost officers. So you had to cut out a lot of these officers that would go out in the community and cut back just to basic services, meaning you just have enough officers to answer 911 calls, and they don't have the opportunity to go out and be proactive and do proactive policing and community engagement, which is really important. But I can speak for over here on the Southwest Florida coast, and a lot of the police departments that I interact with on a daily basis, I think we have a lot of good community support here, especially here in Naples, in which we are in Collier County. We have a lot of people that walk up to us, and it's not unusual for me to be, going out to lunch or something, and someone will walk up and say, thank you for your service to to us, and thank you for what you do. So for just as much controversy is out there, there's a lot of other people that realize that the job of law enforcement is very difficult, and we're facing a lot of challenges ourselves, and people do appreciate it.
That's good to hear. And especially with these kinds of programs, I think it really helps. Okay, we're moving on to the second question, and this is quite important because always how you look at things is really important. So what would you say to police officers that would need to consider police work as a profession rather than a job? Why would they consider it? Why should they consider it as a profession and a career rather than a job?
Well, that goes back to, that's another several points to this, this goes back to the training officers receive. And, you're going through a basic police academy to begin with in order to do that. And you're being certified with a special set of skills. So you're going to be, from where everybody's coming from, you're going to be either certified by the country you're in, the state you're in the state of Florida here, where everybody who's a police officer in the state of Florida or a sheriff's deputy is certified by the state of Florida. So no matter what police academy you go to, you're receiving the same type of training. And then you're going to go on again to whatever agency you work for, and you're going to go through another training process called the FTO, or Field Training Officer process, which can go anywhere from an additional 8 to 12 weeks. So you're talking about 5 to 6 months in the police academy, an additional 8 to 12 weeks training at the agency you're going to end up in. And in all honesty, as technology increases, we never stop training. We are training all the time. And so it can be viewed as a profession rather than a job, because you're constantly reassessing your skill set, reassessing that. In my position, I'm reassessing the skill sets of my officers to make sure that they have the training and the equipment, not only the training, but the equipment to be able to handle all these new types of crimes that are occurring now. So it absolutely is a profession. And then you throw higher education into that and the demands for higher education. You can put a law enforcement career up as a profession just as you can against any other profession out there. So that's definitely why they need to look at it as a profession, and it's a wonderful career.
And it's good that you mentioned, because training is important, and I think everyone acknowledges the fact that police officers today need to have the latest training and the latest skill set. But that you did mention higher education. How does higher education play into this? Why is it important for police officers to also think of this within their learning journey in their career?
See, there's been a push over the last, and we can go back to the history of law enforcement. And you go back in the 60s, there was a big push back then to have all your police officers with college education, and it kind of fell by the wayside. And now you see a movement towards that again. A police officer with a higher education degree, and you can see on the screen, it improves your writing and analytical skills and teaches them to do in-depth research. When I have my detectives, I look at some of these complex cases that some of my detectives investigate for identity fraud through computer crimes and some of these complex theft cases. They really need to know how to write, because what they're doing is preparing documents that are going to be used to prosecute somebody. And if they're missing details, and if they're not doing the right thing, if they're not conducting the right type of research in it, that case is going to get thrown out, and they've just wasted their own time, and they're not going to get a successful prosecution, which is very important. From a day-to-day, even a regular patrol officer, the skills that you learn in higher education, it prepares you to face, complex situations. You may have the same type of call as a police officer, but it isn't necessarily going to be the same type of situation. Everything is different, and that's something that people like about police work. Even though you might do the same calls, every day is different. People are different. The situation is going to be different. And it's always evolving and changing. So somebody with a higher education is going to be really prepared to handle that. And another important topic, and I didn't really consider being a supervisor until I was almost halfway through my career. and I had a supervisor pull me aside and said, "Hey, it's time for you to get out of your comfort zone, and you need to be in a position where you can make changes in the agency. And people respect you as a leader in the agency, and now you need to get promoted and do certain things in order to help steer the direction of the agency." And that's another reason a lot of agencies, if not, and most of them I'm familiar with, require you to have some type of higher education degree in order for you to even test or become a supervisor. So that's another very important reason.
Thank you for sharing. And these are very, very useful insights for anyone who's actually thinking of, becoming a police officer and the career of being a public servant. So by all means, if you have questions, again, I would strongly recommend that you write them down. I see that some of the questions are coming in. Make sure you write them in the Q&A box, and we do have a few minutes at the end of the webinar to address them. Now, you've talked about higher education, and you are currently undergoing your own master's degree in public administration. Of course, I'm also interested, and probably our audience are as well. How did the MPA program help you in your current role, and what were the skill sets that you actually took from the program and applied them in your day-to-day job?
This is perhaps the greatest benefit that I've gotten. I mean, I've gotten a bunch of benefits from this program, but one of the things that all the professors will do is they allow you to when you're doing research projects and you're doing even our day-to-day, our weekly, you do discussion boards for the online program. They always say anything that you are familiar with or for your organization, you're going to write about it. So any of these, and I can't pull a lot of this. There's one I'm going to use an example off the top of my head, but a lot of these skills that you're going to apply, if you can apply it to where you work right now, they want you to write about it, which is fantastic. You can turn right around and do an in-depth research project, something that'll help the efficiency of your agency or your organization or anything like that, and that's what they allow you to write on. For me personally, one of the biggest benefits is I was in the Administrative Services Bureau, and I know that was on my bio. Last 2 weeks, I've got myself and the other captain, we swapped positions, so I'm down in the Operations Bureau now. But in the Administrative Bureau, I was in charge of the budget, preparing the budgets for our department. And one thing I was allowed to do by asking permission from the chief, and he in turn asked the city manager if I could make our capital improvement plan budget to our city council, and they allowed me to do that. And that was directly as a result is because they knew I was in the MPA program at Miami, and they said, yeah, give it a shot. And that's normally just reserved for the department heads to make the budget presentation. So that was quite an honor and quite a responsibility that I was able to do because I was involved in the MPA program. And the capital improvement plan budget is what we do for their high dollar items with shelf lives of 5 years or more. So basically, we're asking for more police cars and any technology that costs a lot of money. We've got our armored rescue vehicle through that we use for our SWAT team. That's another thing that just if you're not familiar with a capital improvement plan budget, that's what that budget is. That's not it's different than the operating budget.
Okay. Good. That sounds wonderful, and congratulations. I mean, for such a task, I'm guessing you do need a set of skill sets, and I'm glad to hear that your supervisors actually saw you as the right person to do that, and that's very, very, very wonderful to hear that also the program actually helped you navigate this specific challenge. Good. So we kind of took a look at what is the landscape and why do we need to consider a police job as a career, and some of the skill set that are required, and why is it important to look at a higher degree. And now another final question that we do have is for our audience, specifically the people that are looking into getting into a civic leadership position. What advice would you give them? What advice would you give them in looking at this beyond just a policing role?
Yeah, anytime you're involved in civic leadership, and if you're going to take an MPA degree, you're definitely going for a leadership role. If you're not in a leadership role now, you will be, because this is going to give you the skills to be a supervisor and be a leader. And people are always looking at ways to serve their community and nation. And a lot of people do that. They serve the country, they go into the military. And a lot of people kind of miss that you can also serve your local community or your state or your nation by being involved in civic government. Get involved in it. You work for a government agency, and a lot of people, government sometimes gets a really bad name out there, and people don't understand exactly what's going on there. Well, you can be the agent of change, especially with an MPA degree and armed with the skill sets you're going to learn with an MPA degree from Miami. You're going to be able to go in there, and maybe you're the one that can change things for the better. And if not, you definitely can have a voice in the way that agency operates around in your city, in your county, in your state, or in your nation. You can be one of the people that makes change. I consider myself, I've been in law enforcement for 28 years, but I consider myself an agent of change because I don't sit still. I don't just do what everybody does because it's just the way we've always done it. I'm all for change and making things for the better. And that's a perfect way for you to get involved in your community, is to get involved with civic leadership.
Well, that's perfect, and it's really wonderful to hear. Also, a curiosity here: as you were going through your online degree and as you were studying with the University of Miami, has has your credibility in front of your peers, has that improved? Have you seen that your colleagues and your supervisors are seeing you with different eyes, as you were going through this specific degree?
I would say absolutely yes. I'm not here to bash other schools, and I know there's a lot of other higher learning education centers, but I will tell you, going to the University of Miami is not easy. But I'm telling you, when you get a University of Miami degree and that's on your resume or that's on your wall somewhere, people are going to know you went to the next level to get this degree. There's a reason that Miami is always rated in the top 40s nationwide as a university. And I work with some of my colleagues that are also getting in master's programs in other areas, and I'm telling you, I do a lot more work than they do. But I think my degree, in my mind, and from the way I've seen people, when I tell them I'm going to the University of Miami, they're like, wow. They understand that's a really big commitment. And there's a reason Miami has the reputation that it does. Like I said, you can get a degree from a lot of different places. And that's something that, my wife encouraged me. Why don't you go to Miami? I believe her quote was, why don't you go to Miami where your degree is going to mean something to you? I've always been, intertwined with the University of Miami since I was a young child. And because of the online program, that's allowed me to realize my dream of going to the University of Miami. If they didn't have the online program, I wouldn't be able to do that. But and don't fool yourself. Don't think just going to online means it's easier. You're going to be doing a lot of work, but it's going to be worth it in the end. And I'm telling you, I'm 2 classes away from obtaining my degree now, and I feel great about it. And it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have reached the Q&A section of today's webinar. So again, if you still have questions for John, please feel free to write them down and I will take them as they come and we can have a conversation around them. Until our audience are looking into writing their questions, I do have one curiosity of my own. How did you manage? I mean, you have such a busy schedule. You're involved in so many projects. You are a leader, a civic, figure for your community, and yet you still manage to you're soon to finish an online degree. How did you find time to do all of this? What was your secret?
It's all about time management. I finished my undergraduate degree online, so I was familiar with online learning. It takes dedication. It has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages is if you really need to be in a classroom and have a face-to-face with a professor on a constant basis, it's not for you. But I think anybody can learn on their own. And the biggest advantage is you do it when you have the time to do it. So a busy schedule is okay. There's nothing wrong with being busy. You just have to make sure you have time and you set aside the right amount of time for it. The good thing is about the University of Miami Online is that your professors will be available. They set up office hours. You can Skype them so you can see them on a camera and they'll answer any questions. I've never had any difficulty getting a hold of my professors. And once you've gone through your first few classes, you will understand the amount of time it's going to take. I can't really give you an hour figure because everybody is different of what you can absorb and what you can learn. But it's a great way to do it if you have a busy schedule and you just give yourself a couple hours each night, or probably 5 nights a week. Give yourself a few hours to get into a quiet place in your home, whatever time of day that works for your schedule, and just get the work done. Do your readings and do your writing.
Thank you so much. Okay, so one first question from our audience. I see that Derek here is asking, hi John, can you just tell us a bit more about what kind of programs you were running in your communities and how open were they to actually receiving these kinds of programs?
Sure, we've done a couple of, we kind of did some different things lately. We've started a coffee, and this is not, once again, none of these programs were invented by us, but we're using them and they're successful with us. We do Coffee with a Cop. That's a program where every other week we set up in a certain coffee shop around the city, different coffee shops, and our officers are just, and these are the line level officers. These aren't the bosses standing there. This isn't the chief of police or myself. These are our line level officers sitting there and talking to community members as they come in. And it's a really informal atmosphere where people can come in and interact with our officers, get to know them on a name to name basis, exchange information. And what it does, it just kind of puts down that barrier of how people approach police. Another thing we've done has been really successful over the past 30 years, and we just revamped it a few times, is our bicycle patrol program. We have an area in Naples, 5th Avenue South and 3rd Street South, which is a kind of a, we're a touristy town. So it's a kind of a high level dining and entertainment area in our cities. And we have officers out there on bicycles, and it's just fantastic the way they interact with everybody in the community. Our Citizens Academy has been a home run. Every time we do a Citizens Academy, we always have people in there that are there's always a handful that are skeptical of police and what police do. And by the time they finish the program, they give us a thumbs up, and they understand, why we do the things we do. And that's been fantastic. I've even seen around the country that there's been some media members that have done that, and some other civic leaders that have done that. And they said, yep, I understand why they do what they do. Those are been successful. We also do a program, and we have a low income housing area very close with the local community, and this ice cream place donates ice cream, and we have a little bit of ice cream and shoot baskets and just kind of interact it, and that's mostly for the younger people. We also do 1 week during the summer, we do a youth academy. It's run with our police and fire department. We do a youth academy where they interact with one another. They get to do, the younger kids get to come in and see fire trucks and police cars and hang out with us for a week and do a lot of different things.
Cool. That sounds really wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Stephanie has a question, sort of a technical question. How important is procedural law to the supervisor role you're currently in versus when you were at the beginning of your career?
It's interesting you asked that. It's very important. Procedure law and what we look at, of course, is policies and procedures. And I'm at a level where I've written policies and procedures. And what we do is for that is we go over best practices, and we are accredited through the CFA, the Commission for Florida Accreditation. So that kind of guides our policies and procedures, which we are constantly revamping. And we have to do for different statutory requirements for that. So that's a good question. But yeah, that's all policies, procedures are always being reviewed.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think we have time for one more question, and this comes from Jenny. Hi, John. So can you please tell us what are your future steps after you've graduated your degree?
Well, I do have the desire to become a police chief. If that works out, that'll be great. I also am thinking about, I've been offered a couple of different teaching jobs at a couple of the universities over here, colleges on this coast, on the Southwest Florida coast. So we'll see what happens with that. But I still feel I have a lot to give. And I would love to, if I could be the police chief of Naples, Florida, that would be fantastic. If not, another area if it's close by, because I really do enjoy Southwest Florida. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. I mean, I'm at the point where I have, my boss, my chief is telling me, yeah, I'm ready. You're ready to go. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm hopeful.
Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you for sharing and taking the time from your busy schedule and being with us today. There you have it. This is, a story, a very successful story and an example. And, For anyone who's looking out to studying an MPA with the University of Miami, here's John, and he's shared with us a wonderful story of how he took on this challenge of, getting involved in the community, applying the skill sets that he has, and, being a change agent for, his police department and the community that he works with. Thank you, John, for joining us. Thank you for being here. It was wonderful to hear your story.
Thank you for having me.
And for everyone who has joined us, this has been a University of Miami live webinar, and we hope to see you in future events as well. Have a good day ahead. Bye.